You are listening to Woodland Walks, a podcast for the Woodland Trust, presented by Adam Shaw. We protect and plant trees for people to enjoy, to fight climate change and to help wildlife thrive.
Charity Wakefield is an actor, environmentalist and Woodland Trust ambassador. She starred in BBC One's production of Rapunzel, Constance in the Three Musketeers at the Bristol Old Vic, Elaine in The Graduate at the New Vic. She had a lead role as Marianne Dashwood in the BBC production of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, and has been in Doctor Who, The Halcyon and Bounty Hunters, amongst many other productions. And she's now starring in the TV series The Great, about Catherine the Great. Well, I met her at her local park to talk acting and the importance of the natural world.
And so we're now at Peckham Rye Park, which has been my local park for most of my time living in London. I now have a baby, so there's lots of kind of mother and baby groups around the area, and I have lots of friends here still.
Are you a country girl, or did you grow up in the city? Or?
I never thought of myself as a country girl. I did grow up though in and around East Sussex. I used to live in a couple of different places down there. We moved a bit as a kid.
Sorry, if you grew up in the country, why didn't you not think of yourself as you felt your inner urban woman early on?
I just don't think I grew up with any sense of identity, if I'm honest, because I also lived a little bit in Spain when I was very small. And like I said, we moved around quite a lot. So actually, I'm an actress and I trained at drama school, and going to drama school at the time of going to university for most people, if you do that, that was the first time I really kind of had this interest to sort of work out where I was from, or you kind of try to identify yourself by telling each other what, and also drama school in particular, you're looking at different kind of life experiences and personality traits because it's kind of material for you, right? So you start kind of realising, I have this background or that background. Yeah, for me, kind of being from the countryside just meant desperate to get driving as soon as I could. I could drive about a week after my birthday because I had secret driving lessons with friends and my dad and stuff. Yeah, I think I've always loved the countryside, and I sort of, had friends that, their family were farmers, and we used to go and make camps in the woods, and yeah.
No, that's good. Well, talking of woods, we seem to be. What's down there? That's a very wooded area. Should we be going? You lead on, but should we go down there or?
So this is the Common. This is Peckham Rye Common,
yeah.
And I think it's been around for at least a couple of 100 years, and it's a really big open space with some really huge trees in the middle. They're probably lots of them are London planes and oak trees, and I think this section that we're about to walk into was actually sort of closed off at the beginning. I think it was a big common, and this was owned by an estate, a sort of family estate, and then opened a bit later, which is why, as you can see, it's much more formal.
I was going to say, so we're leaving a sort of really just a very large green area. You have the shard poking its head above the trees, so it's urban environment, but walking into this much more formal sculptured.
And actually you can walk the whole perimeter of this, and this is quite close to the road here, but the other side, as you see, is really big and open and free, so it must have been quite weird at sort of the end of the 1800s. I suppose that kind of bridge between a really rich family that owned this huge part of the park in the middle. So this is, now we're under these beautiful red-leaved trees. You probably know what that tree is.
No, don't, let's not embarrass each other by
no tree testing.
No tree testing. Well, this is beautiful. So let's look. There's a lovely bench with a dedication. I see some flowers connected to that. So why don't we have a sit down here and just have a chat? So first of all, you mentioned you went to drama school. What drama school was it?
I went to the Oxford School of Drama, which was the smallest, most obscure place I could probably have found. But it was probably the best place for me, actually. It's funny, sometimes what's for you won't pass you, as they say. A tiny drama school in the middle of the sort of North Oxfordshire. Acting is really hard, and part of it is the marathon of it, and the difficulties of getting jobs, and everybody says this, but kind of failing continually and feeling like you haven't actually achieved things perfectly. In theatre, that means doing a show and there being so many moments during the night you think, oh, that didn't work out right. And you have to be that kind of person that is interested in those kind of faults and failures and wants to kind of try different things and fix things. And part of gaining that resilience is what I think drama school is all about.
I mean, apart from, I do want to talk to you a bit more about your acting, but apart from that, you do have what I see as quite a close connection to nature. I'm reading a lot of your social media and learning about your activities. So tell me a bit about that. What is it? What is that connection, and why do you feel it?
I think growing up, albeit in a kind of little village or a town, but kind of in the countryside, I was quite used to sort of, and it was a bit freer back then. I think it was different days, early 80s, being allowed to sort of wander off with friends and go into the kind of woodlands and stuff. I think I just feel very happy when I am in nature, and I am interested in the differences. Everything's growing and changing all the time, and it was interesting. I went to LA once and I thought, this is so strange to me because the seasons aren't so apparent. Particularly when you live in the countryside, you're so kind of affected by those changes. And I really love animals, and I love knowing the circle of life, like where those animals came from, how they're fed, what they do naturally. And then getting older, you start to kind of understand a bit more about history and human history and how we have, got to where we are today, the kind of beginnings of farming and how society functions. And unfortunately, we're at a point now where we've outgrown ourselves. And how do we kind of pare that back? How do we get back
when you say we've outgrown ourselves, what do you mean?
Humans have outgrown ourselves in a sense, I think.
In what sense?
In the sense that we've lost track, I think, of the sort of essence of how you... I think we've lost track of how life is interconnected with nature, because we're pushing technology further and further, and some people are saying the answer is to eventually get into space rockets and go and start a new community on Mars. And to me that's mad, because I feel like we have everything we need on this planet and we just need to reconnect everything.
Why do you think that disconnection has happened then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question because I think it happens on so many levels. I think there's a disconnect with people who are very, very fortunate and have a hell of a lot of money and in some ways don't notice the effect that their companies or their personal lives might be having on the environment, because they are so loaded that they get given their food by people and they probably never see any plastic packaging to even know that it exists, because they're just delivered things and they don't really realise the impact that they're having. They're living a kind of a high life.
But do you think we're all living that sort of life?
No,
or is that just the 1% or the quarter of 1%?
I think there are lots of people that are the absolute opposite. They haven't got the time and the money and the education to be able to do anything about it, even if they did notice that there was an issue.
And yet it's curious that, isn't it? Because, and yet David Attenborough, some national hero, his television programmes are all watched. It's,
but they're not watched by everybody.
They're not watched by everybody, but it seems, I mean, I get the feeling that there's this weird thing happening where everyone's talking about the environment and very concerned about it, even perhaps if we're not changing our lifestyle. But my sort of view is that people do get it, even if they're not changing their behaviour. But you feel differently, I think.
I think there's lots of people on those both extremes that don't get it at all. And I also see lots and lots of people living on the poverty line, particularly where I live in the borough of Lewisham, who are, and I know some people, who are working crazy hours and don't have time to think about it, about any kind of impact, and certainly don't have time to do complicated recycling and they don't have the budget to be able to shop in a kind of what we would probably in our middle class way perceive as a kind of eco-conscious way. And because what's difficult is even if you do that, it's very hard to sort of balance what is the best consumer choice to make, as we all know. So we're in a difficult way, but what what I do believe is that I believe in people power, and I, as you say, David Attenborough has made a huge impact, and it is much more in the mainstream, hugely so in the mainstream in the last couple of years. And I do think it's down to kind of lockdown and people staying at home and actually having the chance to stop and think and reconnect with their immediate environment, whether that's in a high-rise flat, looking out, listening to the lack of the aeroplanes, being able to hear nature more, or somebody that's got, 50 acres and has decided to buy a Diamond Jubilee woodland for the Woodland Trust. I think we are kind of united in that people have had a chance to sort of stop and listen and look. And then it's about the people that are in positions of power and money to give us a direction to go in, and to give us a positive idea.
So apart from intellectually being engaged with this, being worried about it, clearly worried about it, you do a lot of things, actually. So tell me about the lots of things you do.
Well, I really love, I've always, fashion is a part of my job, in the sense that I have to wear lots of different clothes and for my work.
Well, and you were recently in The Great.
That's right. So I do a TV show, period TV show, and so
So there's lots of costumes.
There's lots of costumes. I don't really have control over where those costumes are made and bought, but sometimes I do. So for example, like if I'm producing a film or if I'm in a low-budget theatre production, I might provide my own clothes for that theatre production, and if I'm producing, then I'm certainly in charge of deciding where people purchase clothes. So for example, I can go to charity shops and second-hand places, because there's just so much stuff in the world already. And I try to do that in my personal life.
But do you have a fashion label? Or
No, nothing like that. No.
But you talk a lot about sort of conscientious fashion on social media.
Yeah, I do, because I'm looking for the word influencers and stuff like that, and I get approached for things like that. And so I'm very conscious that if I'm going to be in front of any kind of camera, people are going to make a judgment or think that might be a good idea to wear. So I try to be conscious about what I'm wearing if I'm in the public in any way. And really that's an extension of my real life. I've always shopped in charity shops. When I was growing up, that was because we didn't have any money. So my clothes were given to me by other families, or when I first started to kind of work, which was around 14, I worked in a strawberry farm. Right. That was my first job. And my second job was in another strawberry farm, picking strawberries. And my third job was the same strawberry farm, but in the grocery shop.
Okay, oh, you got promoted out of the fields.
Absolutely, literally up the hill. And I've become extremely aware of how difficult it is to manage woodland. And I didn't even know that as a concept. I just thought that big areas of parkland or woodland or farmland, I had no concept really of how that was looked after. And that's one thing that I think is, I don't know, it's both inspired me and makes me realise what a huge challenge it is to be able to reforest large areas. And the other fact of everything being so slow, trees reaching their maturity at such a slow rate, and that being a very difficult kind of challenge to sort of ask people to become involved with, because I think when you're asking for people to kind of sympathise with a charity or donate money to a charity, in some ways it's more difficult to say, this is an extremely slow process, but we need your help urgently. So it's been interesting to kind of learn about that side of things. And I've been also deeply shocked and saddened about how many of our really ancient woodlands and hedgerows and trees that are still being cut down in this country, partly for huge roadways, but partly for new buildings and farmland, and that does feel quite urgent to me. But yeah, I've learned a lot. I think one of my favourite things has been seeing the tree listening, which I've put on my Instagram if anyone wants to have a look.
So tell me about tree listening.
So there's a way to hear the water being filtered up and down trees, and it's the most beautiful sound, and to me it's a sound that I could go to sleep to. I keep thinking I must try and see if there's a recording online that I can grab and put on my phone to listen to at night time. And it gives you that sense of the tree being alive in the here and now. Trees grow so slowly, it's sometimes difficult to think of them as kind of living in the same time zone as us. So hearing that's a very present sound, really, I don't know, it makes you want to hug the tree even more.
Are you a bit of a tree hugger?
Yeah, I am.
People could spot you in Peckham, strange woman,
I do sometimes do that.
hugging trees.
The weirdest was I was in a different park in Lewisham, and I'd actually climbed the tree because I just felt like it. And I also had some lines to learn, and it was quite an empty park, and I thought, well, this is fine. And I was in a tree learning my lines, and a lady came and she saw my bags on the floor, and she was so freaked out. She just looked up and saw me in this tree, and I have to say it was a weird sight. I had to really say, this is so weird, I'm an actress, I don't know what I'm doing, sorry. I think it was also, when I was growing up, a bit of a place to kind of go and hide. You know, if you kind of stressed out or worried as a kid, and rather than running away, go and climb a tree and be up really high. It completely changes your perspective.
Has having a child changed your perspective at all?
I think it's just strengthened my love of nature, because it's the first thing you teach kids about. All of the books that people give you are all about spotting different animals, right, and trees and the sunshine and bees, and everything he loves is related to outdoors. I mean, it's his first summer. He's 15 months old, and I've moved to a new house recently, and been trying to sort of work the garden a bit because it was very, very overgrown. So it's been my great pleasure to be outside and doing lots of digging. And his first proper words have been dig, 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 because he heard me say digging and he just started saying dig, dig, dig. He says that before mummy or daddy.
So are you optimistic? I mean, all of those things you talked about, are you optimistic that the world for your child will actually, things will get better during his early life, or not?
I feel burdened with the worry of it, and I try to not think about it because the world is huge and there's only so much I can do. I do feel optimistic in the human endeavour and human invention and ingenuity, but I'm sad that it's going to get to a point of huge environmental catastrophe before real change is made by our governing bodies. But then, if you look back at pictures just pre-industrial revolution of these thousands and thousands of huge smoke billowing chimney pots in London, and you know, they're not there now, and the world is a lot greener than it was then, at least in the cities. So I have hope, otherwise, you know, what's the point?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? There's this, I often think about how to shape the narrative here, because I think often the narrative of ecology and the environment is one of, there's an impending disaster, it's all terrible. And I'm not saying that's not true, but I think that's hard for people to engage with, because it's like, well, what can I do about that? And I mean, I think it was, hopefully I got this right, I think it was Barack Obama wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope, and you talk about hope, and it is this sort of weird thing. Actually, to be hopeful is an extraordinary thing. It is audacious to be hopeful, and that might be a better message, actually, that there is this big challenge, but actually the audacity of hope in what can we individuals can make a difference. Yes, joining the trust and what have you, and doing other things and planting a single tree. And
I think you have to also look after yourself as a human in the world. Try to give yourself time and love and energy, and then you'll be in a really good spot to be able to help other things and other people and the environment. It's very difficult, like I say, if you're living below the breadline and you're exhausted, to actually have the headspace and the energy to do stuff. And so those people that are unable to do that, I do believe socially, we need to enable people to be able to care about the environment. If you're in a position where you do have enough money and you do have enough time and you still feel worried, there's tons you can do on a day-to-day level. And I actually think that action is much more infectious than talking. I know we're talking here today, but the best thing I've probably ever done is about 2 or 3 years ago, I just wrote on Twitter, I'm giving up plastic for the month of January. This is before it was kind of fashionable to do that. And rather than saying everyone should do this, everyone should do that, I just said, this is what I'm doing. I didn't even talk about it. I just said, I'm going to do this. And so many of my friends a couple of months later said, oh, you said that, and actually I tried it as well. They didn't even talk to me about it, they just kind of tried it. Or they started, whenever they came over this, I didn't buy any plastic because I knew you weren't interested. I thought, wow, you just actually have to put a stick in the mud sometimes and say, this is what I'm doing, and try to have the energy to stick to it. And of course we can't be perfect. The world is set up in a certain way at the moment. As consumers, everything's wrapped in plastic. It's very difficult to get around without, in lots of places without a car, because public transport has a lot to be desired and is expensive. But if you can try to support things that are doing the right thing, that will slowly build. And if you can have joy in that, that builds as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? We tend to do what our friends do or people we know do. And that's why a single person can make a big difference, isn't it? Because a friend will copy you, and suddenly what you do isn't just a single thing, it's a big thing. That's amazing. So look, we're in this part, which is very nice. I'm not sure I'll ever want to leave here. We were meant to be walking around. I've rather lazily dragged you to this chair. But have you, there's lots of Woodland Trust places outside of London, well, quite close but also quite far. Have you been to many? Are there any stick in your mind?
I've been to Hainault and I've been to Langley Vale. Right. What I'd love to do is go to Scotland. I know there's lots of work happening there at the moment, and I'd really like to visit. It's quite interesting seeing the difference between a very, very ancient woodland and something that's quite newly developed. And I know that there are some places that the Woodland Trust are trying to connect two different forests. And I think, is it pine martens that they're trying to get to sort of repopulate, and it's very difficult to do that because they like travelling, and so you have to have a long distance in between, one dense forest and another dense forest for them to actually want to kind of stick around. So I'd kind of like to see that in action.
Well, the Langley Vale forest I've just been to, and it features in our previous podcast all the commemoration of the First World War, which I think was one of the most interesting and sort of shocking, because there was lots. It commemorates really terrible events, but in a sort of living memory, which I thought was really forceful. And there's, I think, one of the more interesting podcasts. So if you're listening to this, also listen to that one. But I also think that was great. So look, it's amazing sort of to talk to you about this. But also, as you're saying, you're an exceptionally busy actor as well. So you're doing, is The Great still in production?
It is. We're filming season 3 at the moment.
Wow. So how many programmes in a season?
So there's 10 episodes in each season, and the first 2 have come out via Hulu and in America, and Stars Play. The first season was out on Channel 4 a couple of years ago, and the second season is coming out this summer on Channel 4, and we're filming season 3. So it's a lot of fun, it's very silly, and it was lovely to be doing something. I was so lucky to be working during the last kind of lockdown, albeit with really rigorous COVID protocols in place. We managed to get it done, and people like.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I will watch out for the next season and all of your stuff on social media and everything. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Charity. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to Charity for taking me on a tour of her local small wooded area in South London. And do remember, if you want to find a wood near you, well, the Woodland Trust has a website to help. Just go to woodlandtrust.org.uk/find a wood. That's woodlandtrust.org.uk/find a wood. Until next time, happy wandering.
Thank you for listening to the Woodland Trust Woodland Walks. Join us next month when Adam will be taking another walk in the company of Woodland Trust staff, partners and volunteers. And don't forget to subscribe to the series on iTunes or wherever you're listening to us, and do give us a review and a rating. And why not send us a recording of your favourite woodland walk to be included in a future podcast? Keep it to a maximum of 5 minutes, and please tell us what makes your woodland walk special. Or send us an email with details of your favourite walk and what makes it special to you. Send any audio files to podcast@woodlandtrust.org.uk, and we look forward to hearing from you.